Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa alihi tahirin. It's an honor to be able to share the next 2 or 3 days in your presence, and inshallah we can benefit from one another. They've given me 3 titles for the next 2 or 3 days, and today's title was Instilling Tawheed in a modern setting, a modern upbringing. Now this is a very general theme, and it can take many directions as we progress through it. I'm not sure exactly which areas of this theme interest you more, but I'll speak for about 30-40 minutes, and then maybe with your questions you can direct it in a particular direction. In order for someone to be a true muwahhid, a true monotheist, before they start learning about Tawheed, there are a number of phases they have to go through. And those phases are more concerned with their physical, psychological, social, and other dimensions of their life. So before you teach them about Tawheed and what Tawheed is, and that starts especially from 7 years onwards. Although it starts at 2 or 3 years of age, very slowly. But from 7 years onwards, the teaching of Tawheed becomes very serious. But before you teach them and give them the knowledge of Tawheed, you have to prepare their physical and psychological constitution, i.e., their physical aspect of their bodies and their psychological aspect. It has to be very moderate. It has to be very normal. It shouldn't be excessive in any way. Now, as we progress, I will explain what I mean. But this social, psychological, and physical constitution, Islam has a lot to say. When you go through all the traditions of Ahlul Bayt, you see they give rulings and they give us instructions for this reason. They want the body temperament and constitution of the boy or girl to be as moderate as possible, as stable as possible, psychologically and physically. The more stable, the more moderate the physical and psychological aspect of the child is, the more they can be a recipient of true Tawheed. The potential, you have maximized it, the more stable they are. The lesser the stability of their physical and psychological constitution, they would be at a disadvantage. And so we see the parental role here, society's role in general, the school's educational role, all these have their own role. Everyone has their own bit to play. It's not only one person's responsibility, although the parents have the most responsibility in this regard, but even the grandparents, the teachers, the schools, the larger family, friends, and so on and so forth, everyone contributes directly or indirectly to their own share. Before conception, before the child, before the zygote is conceived, Islam goes through many different advices and gives many different instructions on what to eat, how to think, how to earn. You see, you're not allowed to preoccupy your mental, especially the mother, her mental dimension, and fill it and preoccupy it with anything. She shouldn't be seeing anything. The haram, okay, but even beyond the haram, there are some halals that they shouldn't be seeing. It preoccupies their mind, especially things which are futile, void. They're not haram according to the Sharia, but tariqa-wise, it's void, it's futile. The things that she consumes pre-conception, the manner she consumes, what she consumes, all these are play a role in the building of the child. Especially in the traditions, the 40-day period before conception is to be actualized is very important in Islam. Although the Sharia doesn't enter the particularities of this 40-day period, but the tariqa, the spirit of the law, has a lot to say in these 40 days. And the manner which the husband and the wife, the mother and father to be, what role they play during those 40 days and how they should be leading their lives. Even when it comes to the act itself, which leads to conception, that act, which part of the month, the timing is also very important. There are certain periods during the month where, due to the alignment of the stars, due to astrological features, it has an effect on the child. This shouldn't make one be scared of, when we actually conceived and when we didn't. All that Islam wants to say is, even the alignment of the stars has a potential effect on the child. It's not definitive. The reason it's not definitive because there are a whole vast array of other parameters which play and have a very direct role in relation to the child's upbringing and can have a direct effect on the child. One of them is the stars, but there are others too. You may fail in one of them and not fail in another. They may compensate one another. They may not. 101 different parameters, they blend with one another. Yes, I'm not sure what the problem is. 101 different causes, parameters, blend with one another. All together, when looked at holistically, it has its effect on the child. So it doesn't mean if, for example, the beginning of the lunar month, the middle of the lunar month, and the end of the lunar month, that act of conception shouldn't arise in these 3 periods. Or during the Qamar dar Aqrab, the moon in Scorpion period, which is around 2 or 3 days every month. But let's say conception resulted during that time. It's not the end of the world. Although Ayatollah Hassan Zadeh Omali, when they brought a child with a particular illness, I don't want to mention the illness because then people may start gossiping and there may be children with that illness in the community, and I don't want people to start judging. But when they brought a particular child with a particular illness, and this has been documented, he did say it was because the act was committed in the beginning of the month. But many people may commit that act and conceive in the beginning of the month, but that doesn't mean the child is going to get that illness, because there are other parameters in play which can overrule that one particular feature. So look, there are so many different things which contribute to the physical and psychological well-being of the child from birth, even before birth, from conception onwards. And Islam's main concern is that this embryo, which becomes a fetus and then a person, is evolving as moderate and as stable physically and psychologically as possible. Will never be 100%, although with the Imams, this is a very important criterion for infallibility. That stability, that moderate constitution, they had that. But for me and you, it's going to be compromised more or less. We can only do our best. Then, after birth, Islam comes with these rituals in the first week, like the aqiqah, like circumcision. All these have a role to play, because the child, every child is born with their own baggage, with their own spiritual baggage. We believe in spiritual genetics. We believe that in the same way, if the mother and father, God forbid, drinks alcohol or smokes, it would lead to, potentially, it can lead to a child being born with a congenital illness because of what the parents consumed, such as alcohol or smoking or other things. We believe that the parents' sins, if not repented for, that also contributes to spiritual baggage of the child at birth. In the same way, the physical actions, irresponsible physical actions of parents can lead to physical side effects in the child, spiritual contaminations and sins of the parents can lead to a child's spiritual disadvantage. It may be very little, it may be more, we don't know. But these sins, it is conveyed to the next generation and to your next generation. The rituals in the first week, such as the aqiqah, circumcision, one of the rationale behind it is that that spiritual baggage the child has acquired, these rituals lessen the degree of contamination which the child is born with. And so that is an important phase. Even the naming of the child, it's very important. It has an effect on the child's soul even from day one after birth. We have to be careful with the names. Alhamdulillah, the Khoja community are very good in giving names to their children. In this regard, maybe they are more advanced than many other communities. Then in the first 2 years, the breastfeeding, look, phase after phase, all these different instructions that Islam is bringing forward, it's all for the well-being of this child, who is to be a monotheist, inshallah. So after 9 months of gestation in the mother's womb, I forgot that those 9 months probably, according to many scholars, is the most important phase for the child's well-being. The 9 months of gestation in the mother's womb. And here, the mother, how her psychological status quo is, has a direct effect on the child. The more she is relaxed, in peace, less stressed, the more stable that child will be. And this is so important that some scholars of old, during these 9 months of gestation, they've outlined 9 different phases of the child on a par with the 9 months in the mother's womb. And some believe it's not a common perspective. For example, if the mother was to experience a shock or become traumatized in whatever way, let's say in month 2 of the 9-month period, that child in his second phase after birth, if you imagine want to live for 90 years, let's say in the second 10 years, is to experience some form of trauma, some form of burden. The 9 months of the woman's status quo, psychological status quo, has a bearing on the whole life of that child. And in the occult sciences, they pay a lot of attention to this. So here, the best thing that the mother-to-be can do is for the husband to provide that environment. And she shouldn't be occupied with difficult chores. She should have an aide of any sort, be it family, friends, an au pair, whatever. And her psychological status quo has to be maximum. It should be minimally traumatized. And what she sees on television, on the internet, she has to control. Moment to moment, from embryo to the 9-month fetus, what started as a unicellular embryo becomes a 3 to 4 kilogram child. And the mother's thoughts, her soul, is molding this child. So it's very important what the mother is doing. No one is against women working, but we'll speak more about this on Wednesday, inshallah. But at what cost? Especially when they're pregnant. They have to know about certain criteria to abide by if they're working whilst pregnant. And that we'll speak about, inshallah, on Wednesday. Then the first 2 years after birth, the breastfeeding years. In Islam, we don't have to restrict breastfeeding to the genetic mother. And actually, in the beginning of Islam, this custom was very active, that a child has many breastfeeding mothers. And they would choose the mothers very carefully. So, mothers who are with child and are breastfeeding and are known for their ethical dispositions, being patient, not being angry, not being depressed, not being cowardly. Here, Islam prescribes you to take your child and let them breastfeed it. Because according to traditions from Ahlul Bayt, even the spiritual traits of the breastfeeding mother through the milk is passed on to the child. And because of that, you go and give your child to certain mothers who are in the process of milking. You go to them for this purpose, so that those ethical traits be conveyed. Look, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's a very noble thing to do. It takes nothing from the genetic mother, but you want the best for your child. You want a stable psychological child. And sometimes the genetic mother, for example, may not be able to offer that. or they may offer it to a limited degree. So those 2 years are also very important. Then Islam comes and speaks about the first 7 years. And here, from the 2nd year to the 7th year, here, when you look at the traditions of Ahlul Bayt, you see so many different traditions and you wonder, what is the philosophy behind these traditions? Why shouldn't, after 2 years of age, a mother bathe their male son? Or a father bathe their female daughter? And when it comes to sleeping techniques and their bedrooms and how they have to sleep, why would Islam want to enter so much detail? Why have the Imams entered so much detail? Even when you want to offer presents, what kind of presents to offer to your female children? What kind of presents to offer to your male children? Why the father has to be with the female child for most of the day or a significant period of the day? And what are the dangers when a male child is on the whole more with the mother? It goes into all these details. What the scholars have extrapolated is that from 2 years onwards, the sexual identity of the child is starting. The process and the nurturing of one's sexual identity is starting. And Islam wants to nurture the sexual identity of the child in the best way. Sometimes a male son may be nurtured incorrectly and they may acquire feminine attributes to a dangerous threshold. And it's all because of the lifestyle in the first 7 years sometimes. It's very possible. Even there are sins that the mother and father can do which can lead to such a predisposition of a male son acquiring female attributes. We have that in the traditions. This nurturing side, it's very important. So here, that's in the first 7 years. In the first 7 years, Islam doesn't discipline the child. This is something they teach you in the West, to discipline the child as early as possible. Even from 2, 3 years of age. They started this many decades ago in America. And America is not a very good model in this area. And it failed in this area. You only have to see society and youth in America. This disciplining is not, we don't have it in Islam in the first 7 years. And disciplining, I mean in the general sense. Even telling them what time to eat, what time to sleep. These are forms of disciplining. We don't have it. They're free. Yes, this is very difficult for the mother, but Islam never planned for one woman to bring up a child. We don't have this in Islam, that the genetic mother alone has to bring up a child. They have a husband, they have family, the husband has to provide with services. Otherwise, if one woman was to bring up a child, that's almost impossible. It can lead to the woman becoming psychotic sometimes. And therefore, they have to get help. But disciplining in food, in sleep, and in other things. Because the child doesn't understand discipline. Their aql, their intellect, their power of rationalizing is at a low. It's very minimal, especially at 2, 3, 4. From 5 onwards, things are beginning to start. But still, body language is the language they understand. How the father speaks to them, how the mother speaks to them, how the mother and the father react with one another. They get a lot, they absorb a lot from the body language. But if you told them, go to sleep, eat this, or don't do that, or do this, they don't understand that. It will have a negative effect on them. And that's why for the first 7 years, Islam is very open. Don't discipline them. That doesn't mean don't educate them, but the education should be discipline-free. For example, in a playing environment, not in a hardcore school environment. In the second 7 years, you see, stage after stage, all these different instructions of Islam, for when? What is all this for? In the second 7 years, then Islam brings a very strict protocol where discipline is the norm, and you have to discipline the child now from 7 to 14. The child will now understand, can rationalize. You can rationalize with them, explain the nature of the discipline. You do good things, I'll reward you. You do bad things, I'll punish you. Not a physical punishment, but you can use your own initiative. Things which a child likes, you prevent them from it, and so on and so forth. But the reason this discipline is so important in the second 7 years, where the male or female child will now attain to the age of puberty in the second 7 years, is because submission to their parents through discipline, when they attain to puberty, they have to submit to Allah. And this submission to Allah, they have to be prepared for it, because it's a list of do's and don'ts all of a sudden. And to prepare them for this submission to Allah, they have to submit to their parents as a preparatory tool to submit to Allah after puberty. So look, for the first 14 years, look at the different cause and effects that played a role in this now 14-year-old. The destiny of this 14-year-old, maybe more than 90% of it, was outside the hands of that child. It was to do with the parents, school, teachers, food. It was to do with the other people outside the jurisdiction of the child, him or herself. It was to do with other people. So that look how other people have molded, either positively or negatively, the destiny of this 14-year-old. And if you don't abide by the prescriptions of Islam, look at the amount of negative baggage you would be instilling in this child over a 14-year period, starting from preconception. And now you want to teach them Tawheed. Look. Now you want to teach such a person Tawheed. How much of a recipient are they in accepting Tawheed? And what kind of Tawheed have you explained to them? How have you taught them Tawheed? Who taught them Tawheed? Were they qualified to teach them Tawheed? This Tawheed is the most fundamental article of faith in Islam. It is Islam. And everything in Islam be it in jurisprudence, in ethics, in doctrine, aqa'id, is traced back to Tawheed. Everything. To the degree you compromise with Tawheed, you're compromising with that child's spiritual fate. But something such as Tawheed, which is so important, who is teaching the child? Especially in the second 7 years. As will become evident, we are failing in Tawheed to a very high degree. Yes. It's the ultimate reason why many of our youth, especially in university onwards, they become disassociated with Islam. They may admit it, or like most of them, they may not admit it and follow Islam as a mere cultural thing. And some of them, though, may admit it, that they're disassociated with Islam. Because they were never taught Tawheed. Then they were thrown into university in an academic setting where you're taught to question everything. And then now they don't have answers. And it's not their fault. They were failed in the first 14 years. In this second 7 years, knowledge takes a very important role now. Although there are other things too, even before 7 years, but especially in the second 7 years, Islam prescribes sports, handwriting, poetry, traveling. Islam wants someone to be stable in many dimensions, even emotional stability, psychological stability. And these activities help with that. Knowledge is one aspect. Some people, all they do is they throw the knowledge down their throats and they're oblivious and heedless to the other dimensions of the child. Those children are going to become not very moderate and stable people. They may become extreme on either end. Sometimes you see the mother and father are very religious and the child may not be. It was because the religious mother and father may be one reason, there may be other reasons. They only focused on the religious dimension, the knowledge dimension. And they were heedless to the other needs of the child. The stability of the child can be damaged, impaired, and then they won't be a good recipient of that knowledge. Sometimes you see two parents where in every field they're very stable. The psychological, the emotional needs of the child are given very stable, with stability. They travel, they do all normal things. But the parents may not be religious, for example. But with all the other needs of the child, they're satiated. And then this child becomes a very good recipient of Islam. Once they see a scholar, the click happens. It didn't happen with the parents, because let's say, imagine they weren't as religious, but the parents met the needs, the other needs of the child. And that child was a good recipient. It clicked for them. You see, all these things are possible. There are 101 different parameters or factors that blend with one another. How the child is going to click, we don't know. But that which is important, this was all an introduction to prepare the child, what the parents can do, grandparents, family, friends, school, teachers, the local mosque, and so on and so forth. But the main issue is, this was preparing them to be a recipient, successfully be a recipient of Tawheed, understand it, incorporate Tawheed. And therefore it's important what this Tawheed is. What is it? Is it just a piece of knowledge, or is it a protocol of action? And actually it's an action. Tawheed is something you have to do. It's a doing verb. It means maximally assigning oneness. That's the literal definition of Tawheed. Now what does it mean to maximally assign oneness? We'll come to that later. But I'm saying Tawheed is an action. It's not just an article of faith that you have to know about. It has to be acted. It has to be manifested by you, your mind, your limbs, and so on and so forth. But to be taught Tawheed, who's going to teach you? One problem in the West, especially in America, where I've been many times there. I'm not sure about Tanzania. This is my first time here, so I'm not very familiar with the setting here. But the Tawheed which our children are taught, especially in the West, is a Tawheed which is deficient, given by an unqualified volunteer in Sunday school. That which is the most important, fundamental article of faith in Islam, which everything is traced back to, everything, any aspect of Islam. And Islam is Tawheed, is taught very minimally by an unqualified person who is not qualified to teach, but has free time, wants to do volunteering work, and they go and teach Tawheed to our children. Look at the irresponsibility here. With no secular science, are you ready to bring someone who's not qualified to teach your children? Be it geography, history, biology, chemistry, all these different sciences. You always find the strongest teacher for your schools, especially if you have the means. You shouldn't compromise even with those sciences. But with Tawheed, which is the fundamental building block of the human being, we're ready to bring any Tom, Dick and Harry to teach our children. You know, it's a frightening perspective. It's very frightening how we've become desensitized to this. And then this unqualified person comes to Sunday school and says Tawheed means Allah is one, not two, period, full stop. Now let's go on other parts of Islam. And they teach now other parts, the rituals. The rituals are very important, only if your Tawheed is perfected. Because the rituals are a manifestation of Tawheed. You haven't learnt anything yet. And then with the rituals, they emphasize, overemphasize. They go overboard. Some of the rituals aren't even Islamic in nature. They're not haram, but they're not Islam. It's a cultural thing. Just because it's a cultural thing, I don't mean to say it's bad. No. Every culture has its own things. Yes, but they focus on the rituals of Islam and sometimes the rituals of their culture to a very great extent, where the child, they know these rituals very well, but they have no Tawheed. And all these rituals, they're harvesters. They cultivate you, but they cultivate the Tawheed you've incorporated in you. If you are Tawheed free, if you are Tawheed empty inside, you do all the rituals that there is, you're not cultivating anything. And so we come to this problem that the child hasn't learned Tawheed, now they want to go to university. And then these different social media which exist, the child going online, internet, they surf through the internet, they go through these YouTube videos. No one is saying the internet is bad, but there's a very important threat at hand. And Islam has paid attention to this threat. In one verse of the Holy Quran, it reads, وَأَنْ لَوْ اسْتَقَامُوا عَلَى الطَّرِيقَةِ لَأَسْقَيْنَاهُمْ مَاءً غَدَقًا. That if they stay steadfast on the path, we would have definitively satiated them with abundant water. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says this water, in addition to the rain, it's referring to ilman kathira, voluminous knowledge. And from such traditions, which we have a lot of, we see that water in the batini, inner sense, is knowledge. And with these codes which the Imams have given us, we can understand the Sharia in a better light. And this Sharia, I'll give you an example right now. This example I'm about to give you, when I tell you it, you say, oh, this is boring, we know what this is. But now with this code the Imam has given, a new light will be shed upon what you're all used to. In jurisprudence, you've all heard of water being classified into different things. One classification of water is water can be qaleel or khor. Another classification is water can be mutlaq, absolute, normal, or mudaf, mixed with something, to the degree that it's no longer qualifies as water, like orange juice, something like that. Here, the Imam says water is knowledge. So here, when water is categorized into two, the human soul, the carrier of knowledge, the human soul is categorized into two. So in fiqh, jurisprudence, there's one narrative, we stick to the letter of the law. At the same time, there's a spiritual, batini, inner narrative. These two narratives go hand in hand. You shouldn't be heedless to either one. Both are important. If you stick to one of them at the expense of the other, you will fail, either way round. Water is divided into qaleel, little, and khor, voluminous. The esoteric, batini narrative, from that tradition from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, the human soul, which is the carrier of knowledge, it can be little, or the human soul can be voluminous. Let's go back to fiqh, the Sharia. If you put something najis into qaleel water, the whole water becomes najis. If you put a najis material into muzaf, mixed water, like gallons and gallons of oil or orange juice or anything which isn't water, where water is mixed to such a degree that it's no longer called water. Even if it's gallons and gallons, if a little najis enters it, it all becomes najis. Look. Now what's the esoteric Batini story of this? What are these fiqhi rulings trying to teach us so that our souls become elevated? If your knowledge, O human being, if your knowledge is qaleel, be careful. If a najis was to be encountered, you would be existentially najis throughout your soul. Now a najis, one example of an esoteric batini najis is religious dilemmas, false knowledge, religious dilemmas, worldly, West toxified lifestyles. If your knowledge is little, and then you go on the YouTube and listen to lectures by non-Muslims speaking against God, raising questions against God, against prophethood, against resurrection, and whilst your knowledge was little, and you become encountered with such a najis religious dilemma, you've made yourself spiritually najis throughout. إِنَّمَا الْمُشْرِكُونَ najas. Here the mushrikun isn't only the people who say X person is God. Shirk in the Quran is of two types. And wherever shirk is mentioned, you also have to consider the concealed other form of shirk, which you can easily have when your knowledge is qaleel, is little. You'd be contaminating yourself. Even if your knowledge is a lot, but it's muzaf, it's knowledge mixed with falsity, even then, with the smallest of religious dilemmas, you're going to make yourself najis. This is very, very problematic because we're not attentive to this reality. And our youth, since they don't have access to true scholarship on the whole in the West, they are suffering this problem. All of them. It's just that, not all of them, most of them, but it's just that some of them, they go and find the solution. Some of them, they turn back against their beliefs. And some of them, they turn back, but they don't disclose they've turned back. And they're just a Muslim by name, and it's more a cultural thing now that they're living. Qaleel water, if it's najis, how does it become pure again? It has to be blended with core water. It has to be connected to a well or a subterranean source of water, a river, a source. Or it has to be connected with core water. A community has to be under the auspices of true scholarship supervision. They have to be connected to the source. Even many scholars in Rome, they're connected to the source there. They're in Rome. They're in the seminaries. But when they come back, return to their hometown, over a period of time, they can even become qaleel. It's very possible. There's nothing to guarantee you will stay core. You have to always be connected to the source, or you yourself have to be core, voluminous knowledge, so that the smallest of religious dilemmas doesn't pollute you. Now look, that's a protocol we have. Now who is teaching us Tawheed? It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing what's happening with Tawheed. And who's teaching us? Now you may say we have no other choice. When I say you, I don't mean you. MashaAllah, you may have a very strong community school. You have to, I'm speaking in general terms. But someone may say, look, in America we have no choice. And they may be right. They may be right. But don't be comfortable with that choice. Move away. Adopt a different lifestyle. Go to somewhere, another place. You know, when someone is about to die, pig meat becomes halal for them to consume if there's nothing else. To that extent which keeps one alive to survive, you're allowed to consume pig meat. If you're, let's say, in a desert and there's nothing, you're about to die, there's some pig meat, it's haram. But it'll be justified to consume pig meat. But you won't adopt staying in that desert. You'll want to move away. You won't be comfortable with consuming pig meat every day. You want to move away and find wholesome foods. The same with Tawheed, even more important. Okay, you maybe have no other choice than to be taught Tawheed by an unqualified teacher in a Sunday school. Although I personally believe most people, they're not forced into that. They can move away. But let's say you are forced into such a status quo, don't be comfortable with it. That's important. And then we come to, okay, how are we going to teach Tawheed now? How are we going to do it? Now, it's now past 5 o'clock and I don't want to enter this topic right now. Maybe I've spoken about this, it's online, I can give the sisters an address, the videos you can watch. Or we can speak about it in another day. But let's now put, I'll just put the attention on you now if you have any questions, and then we'll continue another session inshallah. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Tawheed. Yes, yes. 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 In relation to the nurture, you see, we have a lot of ahadith from Ahlul Bayt. And when one looks at these ahadith, such as the father not bathing the daughter from 2 years onwards, not that it's haram, but it's emphatically discouraged. Or the mother not bathing the male son, the child, or the kind of presents you give. When you look at it, it seems very random. But when you look at them, the whole list of traditions, the whole different areas such as these, and then analyze them holistically, the scholars say what Islam is aiming at with all these traditions is nurturing the sexual identity of the child. If the child is male, anatomically, Islam wants to cultivate and nurture a male gender in that male child. You see, when you say male, sometimes it's an anatomical criterion. That's on a par with their anatomy. The child is male or female, depending on their anatomy. Gender is, and therefore you say the sex of the child is male or female. So sex is a function of anatomy. Gender is a function of one's psychology. They're masculine or feminine. on the whole, or everyone shares a bit of both. But predominantly, if they're masculine, their thoughts, their psychology, you say they're male, gender-wise, or female, if it's female psychology. Genetics is on a par with the genes. If they're XX, they're male, female. If it's XY, they're male. Now here, if someone is born normally with a male anatomy, these prescriptions of Islam have been ordained in a manner that the gender, which is a function of one's psychology, grows and is nurtured on a par with that anatomy. They want to align the anatomy and the gender of that child. That's the aim. With this particular example, with a father bathing a daughter, this has been discouraged from 2 or 3 years onwards. Why? Here the scholars have said this, that it's because that daughter is aware to some degree, albeit little, but from 2 or 3 years onwards, they become aware that I am different to this man who's bathing me. They can tell that from 2 to 3 years onwards. And you know, many of you have seen it, but don't think this is a very shocking statement to say that their sexual identity starts at 2 or 3. Sometimes at 2 or 3-year-olds, when they're sleeping, due to hormonal changes, even at 2 or 3, you see the son, your male child, for example, with certain signs that show, even though they don't become stimulated in any way, because they don't know about those haram things, but the hormonal alteration itself leads to changes. So the scaffolding is there. They're in the process of becoming. That identity is in the process of being made. When a daughter sees a man bathing her, confused messages, signals are given. Because they know they're different. They understand this. If this becomes normalized, where a man keeps on showering or bathing the daughter, this normalization that we are less and less different can be problematic. Even presents. You give feminine presents to female children. Do that more. It helps with the nurturing, for their feminine characteristics to be nurtured. One thing that you all can do, especially with 2 or 3-year-olds, to evaluate how healthy or non-healthy your 2 or 3-year-old is right now. Let's say if it's a daughter, tell them to draw a picture of mummy and daddy, for example. Then when they draw their mother, pay attention to how they've drawn their mother. Does the mother have earrings? Did she draw a necklace? Clothing? Things which are feminine attributes. Does the daughter depict those in her picture? The lesser these things are drawn, it's a worrying sign. It's a worrying sign. This should help you, guide you. That's why in Islam, the mother is always enjoined, encouraged, for example, to disclose her femininity in the house. Even if it's only one necklace. Not only for the husband, but even for the child. These are things which contributes to that nurturing identity. That female nurturing identity becomes stronger and stronger. As a male, other things. When you want to give presents, how you give presents, To the male children, it has an effect on their maleness, their identity as a male. All these are linked with Tawheed. We'll speak about it on Wednesday. But now imagine a daughter sees the mother after 2 or 3, much less, and sees the father more. Or a son, most of the day, doesn't see the father. Sees that is always with the mother. It's going to be difficult. I'm not saying it's the end of the world, but it's going to cause problems. Little or more, it depends on every scenario is different. So a father who works morning to night for financial gain and for monetary reasons, that father has to say to myself, until when do I want to keep earning, getting a bigger and bigger house, bigger and bigger car? Something may be compromised. My child's well-being may be compromised. At what cost do you want to keep on adding to your worldly life? If a son is with the mother, and this is not something even the West, psychologists, that children who are brought up without a father figure, they've even linked it to homosexuality and many other very difficult psychological states, because they never had a father figure. The same if you don't have a mother figure. You need that nurturing of one's identity. The mother and father have a very primary role. Okay, let's quickly go through 1 or 2 questions. When you mention about a female not to bathe a male child, us mothers bathe the child. The father is at office, there's no option, as a 2-year-old would not be independent. How do you address this? Well, yes, you don't bathe the child. You wait for the father to come home. Or you get help, a male help. In the same way there are female help, you have au pairs who help you. Get male au pairs. Or get a family member. Then how do you instill Tawheed in a modern upbringing? Is there going to be another session? Yes, inshallah, yes. I have a family friend whose daughter decided to remove her hijab. Upon speaking to her, I realized that she doesn't see the point in Islam, or rather any religion. Each time I try to get a point across, she gives me strong answers based on facts. I try to push her too much, I try not to push her too much, as I don't want her to stop trusting me. She's around 16 or 17. Do I let her find her way, or should I continue to try to help her, risking pushing her away? Yes. 16 and 17 is the third 7-year period. It's too late now. It's too late. It's game over. So the language in the third 7 years is the language of compassion. You don't have the upper say or force her or discipline her. It's of no use. So if you maintain that compassion with the hope that maybe it will speak to her heart and she'll open up to you, it's okay. But compassion has to always be there. In certain ahadith, we've told spiritual maturity is achieved at the age of 40. For us, in our current state, how do we strengthen ourselves with regards to our Tawheed, or begin instilling Tawheed in ourselves in a lacking environment? Okay, that we have to discuss maybe tomorrow, inshallah. Yes. Could you please elaborate on the type of presents for each gender? How does that affect the child? For example, a gun for a male child, or a male-dominated sport, things pertaining to that sport for that child. For daughters, adornments, clothing of a particular type, earrings, rings. Let them adorn themselves. Don't inhibit them. Let them nurture themselves. If our child is now in that 14-year age, and we want to ensure that we can get the concept of Tawheed in them and make them understand it, how can we do that? Is it too late? 14 is the brink now. It's never too late, okay? It's never too late. It's just that the probabilities are now not in your favor. But it's never too late. Yes. Inshallah, we'll speak more about Tawheed in tomorrow's session. وصلى الله على محمد وعلى آله